Hello, and welcome back to the show. Today I talk with Suzy Olivier. Suzy is a business coach, a serial entrepreneur, a military wife, and a mom of three. She has built several different businesses. So we talked through what it's like to build different businesses in different seasons of life. And then we got into this deeper conversation about this archetype that a lot of entrepreneurial mothers fall into, where we become kind of the burnt out martyr, where success is defined as like how hard we can work. And we take some kind of like subconscious pride in really stressing ourselves out and really overworking and depleting ourselves for this ultimate eventual outcome of ease and freedom that I think a lot of us want, that we think that we'll find at the end of the like work yourself to death rainbow. And her and I really got into what does it look like to just do less and to trust that in doing less, you'll find the freedom, you'll find the ease, and the abundance will come in, and how hard it is for a lot of us mothers to rewire our beliefs around success and freedom and ease and fulfillment and joy, because we are so conditioned to burn ourselves out. So this was an awesome conversation. I really loved it, and I'm excited for you to listen. Hello, and welcome back to today's show. Today I'm here with Suzy Olivier, and I am really excited for this conversation. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We were just talking before we pressed record about virtual podcast recordings and like showing up at the end of a day feeling already tired and makeup melted off and not looking necessarily our best, but that this is like when the real conversation comes out. So if you're not somebody watching on video, then you could just imagine us like in our loungewear at the end of a long day here chatting. So
various stains on my shirt.
Yeah. I thought that like coming down the stairs to come do this, I was like, oh, I should change my shirt. And then I was like, oh, no one's going to see it. It's totally fine.
That was my exact thinking. My husband goes, I'm like, you got a little something. I'm like, it'll be fine.
Nobody can see. I mean, even if you can, like mom life. So let's jump in with just a little bit of your backstory. Tell us about the work that you do and how you came into that work. And then of course, where motherhood entered the journey and where you're at today with everything that you're working on.
Okay, I'll try and be as succinct as physically possible because it's a long backstory. So I have been in the business building space since 2008. It was the very first thing I did. And I have built up a amazing, really successful personal training and physiotherapy, or physical therapy, as you guys say, company really, really quickly. And that was kind of like my first introduction. Business kind of happened to me versus me going intentionally, I'm going to build a business. And it was amazing. And then my beautiful, wonderful husband got invited to join the Royal Air Force. And we're both South African living in the UK. So I'm like, oh, he's never going to get in. We're South African. And then like 2 weeks later, he's like, I start officers training in 3 weeks. I'm like, oh, well, that happened fast. And so completely blindsidedly became a military spouse. And then the house moves began, and him coming home and going like, we're moving again in 6 weeks time, and realizing that starting a location-based business like every 2 years or less just wasn't going to work. And then I was also pregnant with our first baby. And I very quickly realized that even having a business which requires me to go out and exchange time for money just wasn't my thing. I wasn't down with that. I always dreamt of being a stay-at-home mom, being present for my kids. So that began this very intentional search of like, right, I need something that I can sell and send out to the world like a product, because the online service-based thing wasn't quite happening just yet. So I can be a stay-at-home mummy and I can like move around wherever the Air Force wants to put us. And that birthed a physical product business called Mama & Belle, which is where I designed kind of baby-safe jewelry for mums, teething jewelry, which was kind of present in the States and was present in Australia, but it was non-existent in the UK. So I'm like, cool, I'm going to trial this out. I managed to, through some divine intervention, find a factory in China who was willing to work with me. I'm like, I need like 10. Like, no, minimum order's 5,000. I'm like, no, but I don't have money for 5,000. Give me 10 of each color. And again, I have so much grace and blessing over my life. Like, yeah, you know what? We haven't tried the UK market. We'll try it through you. And I think I must have made myself sound way more important and bigger than I was. because I agreed. And before I knew it, I had all these prototypes. And before I knew it, I was launching and building an e-commerce website back before you had all these cool DIY builders, back in the day where you had to kind of like go and like find code snippets to try and change that font color and change the placement. So yeah, built that e-commerce website, and that business absolutely exploded. Before I knew it, we had stockists all over the country, all over Europe. We had international distributors. We were supplying the UK's largest department stores, national awards. It all happened very, very quickly. Throw in some more house moves, throw in another baby. And I launched a few more product-based businesses. I just really enjoyed the playground of it. And it was with Mama and Belle, the teething jewelry. I was very prominent on social media. We had tens of thousands of followers on all channels. And I was very open about my life as a stay-at-home mum. And I exclusively breastfed, and I was a military spouse. And I would get these messages constantly, literally every day going, I want to start a business, but where do I start? And how do you manage it all? And how do you juggle it all? And how did you grow on social media? And I found myself enjoying replying to those messages more than running the business. And so that's when I'm like, right, I'm going to start a platform to support mums in business. Again, this is talking 2015, 16. There wasn't a huge, big kind of mumpreneur, not too sure how I feel about that term, movement happening yet in the online space. And so it took about 2 years of me fighting every ounce of imposter syndrome, going like, who the hell are you to even think about stepping up to that kind of role and being that kind of support? And like, what do you know? You haven't got an MBA, and like, sit back down in the corner. And again, divine intervention came up, and I was like, okay, fine. I'm just going to jump. I'm just going to jump off the cliff, and I'm going to figure it out as I go. And so I launched Mothers of Enterprise back in 2018. Yes, that sounds about right. Right before a international house move to Cyprus. And the business has just grown and grown and grown since then. And now, I don't know, 5 years in, another baby. A few more house moves. And yeah, here we are. So it's been quite a long journey, say since 2008, but it's all paths and all decisions have led me here. So I couldn't be more grateful for my little backstory.
That's amazing. Yeah. I mean, just building product businesses, well, businesses of any kind, but especially product businesses with all of the dependencies and suppliers and stockists and growing it and all of that is so much. And then to get to that level of success is, I think, a story in and of itself that I want to talk about. But also then adding on that you're doing that with babies coming into the picture and being a military spouse, that you're moving around. It gets into this concept of the mother load around, you're managing a big load on multiple fronts and trying to keep every ship afloat, and of course we'll talk about it, but some balls dropping, some things not getting done necessarily perfectly or as well as you want, but ultimately trusting that each of the things in your life, your relationship and his military career, your children and their timing coming into your life. And then of course, growing your business, that each one is happening for a reason in that timing. Absolutely. Right. And so you mentioned imposter syndrome, and I do want to jump into building a product-based business and just touch on that. But before we do that, with imposter syndrome in terms of not necessarily specific businesses, but just this, I think it's a really common thing that we say a lot as moms, where moms in business, where it's like, I have imposter syndrome. Like, can I really do this? Or should I be teaching this? Or who am I to teach this? Because I'm not an expert in motherhood. I'm not an expert in business. But then we qualified all of that with like, but I built this like 7-figure, 8-figure product business. I also launched this other thing, and I was doing it all with 3 kids, moving all over the world. And so like we qualify ourselves as the, on the back end of this really powerful statement that says, I feel like I'm an imposter. So how, like, when you say that, were you really feeling like you couldn't do it? I mean, did you have moments of feeling like, I shouldn't do this, like I can't do this? Or was it more like, wow, surprise or wonder at, why are people wanting me to, almost like, why me? Talk a little bit about how imposter syndrome really feels, because that question comes up so much in conversations on motherload and just in general with work, probably in your world too. A lot of us feel it as mothers. And I think when we're working with other mothers, it's common because we're like, oh, she has older kids than me. She's like more of an expert mother, or her business makes more money than me. She's more of an expert business person. But that, as we know, once you get into all of this work, that's not actually how. That doesn't really mean anything, right? And so
absolutely,
in those moments where you're feeling that way or saying that to yourself, how did it really feel? And then what did you do to push yourself through that, so to speak, so that you did actually bring the thing to life, bring the ambition to life? Because that's the other side of imposter syndrome, is I think a lot of us also feel that and are like, I'm not going to do it. Like, I'm just going to be a mom right now. I'm just going to stick with the safer career, whatever it might be, because we get that rise of like, ooh, who am I?
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me, it was literally all of the above on statements like, I want to do it, I shouldn't do it, I should do it, I can do it, but who am I to do it? It was a complete kind of mixing bowl of all those emotions. And for me, it was this constant reaffirming every day when I was replying to these women and I was doing like voice note coaching in the DMs on Instagram, going like, oh, I know the answer to that. Oh, I know how they should start. Or I know they should juggle that. Or I know who they should contact. Or I know exactly how they need to go about doing this. And so I was getting these little micro doses throughout my day of like, oh, you know your stuff. Calm down. Like, you can't help these women. But it was, for me, I didn't come from a big wealthy background. I didn't go to college. I had my spot to go. And then I thought, bugger it, I'm going to move to Canada. And I did that. And that put me on a whole different path in life. And I ended up deferring my place and then deferring my place. And then like, I'm not going. I'm good. I built a business and I'm good. And so I had all these kind of like, who am I? That was probably the biggest line for me. Who am I to be doing something like that? Who am I to be putting myself into that level of credibility and expertise and leadership and teaching? Because I'm no one special. I think that was probably like the main catchphrase. Like, I'm just not anyone exceptional. And that's putting myself into that environment. That means I'm saying to myself, like, yeah, you're pretty good at this. And like, you can help people and people need you. And that just felt so egotistical to me and so alien. And so when I realized that, I think it was Marie Forleo, to use a cheesy line, but her line that she always says is like, the world needs a special gift that only you have. And I was like, but I'm not that special. And there's plenty of other people that got gifts in the world. And it was literally, I was getting messages from people going, you should become a business coach. And I'm like, I am not doing that. I hate the coaching world. They're all like charlatans and snake oil salesmen and take tens of thousands of my pounds and dollars. And I get into the programs and the smoke and mirrors. And like, I never want anything to do with it. So yeah, I think it was a combination of who am I to be doing this? And then getting those kind of little, say, those micro doses of confirmation every single day that I should be doing it. And I think after 2 years, I was driving my poor husband absolutely nuts with, he would walk in the door and I would have like hyped myself up in the day going, I'm doing this. I'm going to launch it. I don't know how. And again, we're talking before the day when every second coach had a course on how to make courses and every second coach had a thing about how to grow a membership. And like, this is a day where like you had to kind of Google your way through, like, how do you record something? And like, where do you put your thing once you've recorded it? Like, Kajabi wasn't even properly around yet. And so yeah, I'd hype myself up going, I'm going to figure it out, husband. I'm so excited. And the next day I'd be like, no, I'm maybe late, maybe when the girls start school. And like you say, you push it back to like, no, let me just stay with my kids where I'm safe and where everything's okay. And I'm not completely shitting myself constantly. And I got tired of it. I got tired of the seesaw of it. I got tired of this idea never going away. I got tired of having these confirmations coming in daily to me and me pushing it. And deep down, I knew it was what I was meant to be doing. I really, really knew it. So yeah, I just put my big old pants on, as the Brits say, or panties on, as you guys say, and thought, bugger it. Like, what's the worst that's going to happen? I fall on my face and I fail and I pick myself up and I go back to being full-time stay-at-home mummy. Or I go at this and it's everything I ever could have hoped it could be. And very grateful to say it's the latter for me. It really, I mean, not that it has been challenging. And there's been days where I've thought, this is stupid. I'm going to go and get a job like we all do at some stage. You're like, no, this is ridiculous. Like, I could just go out and work for a couple of hours and come home and get a salary and not have to think about content or clients or management or my team or anything. Like, can you imagine like how stress-free that is? But like, you keep going. Like, I think entrepreneurship, and especially when you try and combine it with motherhood, the tenacity and the drive that you need is unwavering. You need that constant current in your soul pushing you forward, because there are days, even when you've got a successful business, even when you hit the 6 figures and you hit the 7 figures and your team's running smoothly, that it all just feels like a lot. So I think that drive within me from kind of before I launched to go, just nudging me going, this is what you are meant to be doing. I chose to bet on that. And also chose to put my husband out of his misery of me going, I'm doing it, I'm not doing it. And I just jumped all in. And yeah, thankfully I haven't looked back.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's affirming to hear those stories, because I think it shows people that even in the midst of feeling that way, it's not like you fixed it overnight. It's not like you felt that way one day and then the next day you're like, fuck it, I'm in. it took years for you to actually work up the courage, and you went through cycles of like, I'm going to do it. No, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm not going to do it, which I think is a really real way of how it happens for a lot of us, where we have the nudge for months or years at a time. And it takes a while to trust it. And then you mentioned your intuition and kind of knowing, having a sense of knowing. And I'd love to hear more about, just in general, with everything you've done in business, how much do you, and as a mother, how much does intuition or kind of having that inner compass guide you through the success that you've had? Like, how much of it do you attribute to that? And I'm curious, just for my own knowledge, in building the product-based business and then transitioning into more of this coaching world, as you added children into the mix, do you feel like you got more in tune with that inner voice, the intuition? Or, at what point did you start really trusting that to help you make decisions in the business?
Such good questions. So for me, I will hand on heart say that all my success is down to intuition and, like today, internal compass. And for me, my faith as a Christian is literally everything in my business. I say to everyone, like, God's the CEO of my business and I'm the ops manager. And for me, that level of detachment makes my life enjoyable. It makes my business enjoyable because I don't feel like it's all on me. So, and that's obviously very much down to kind of people's personal beliefs and faith and things like that. But for me, for my journey, that has literally been everything. So when I first started, I was a really rubbish Christian. I was really bad. And my faith wasn't kind of, I was a work in progress, as we all are, but I was kind of my early days of kind of discovering that side of me. And I had shingles 3 times before I was 30. So I had my 2 kiddos, husband away a lot, I had both businesses running. So I had the personal training company still going, and I had the product-based business still going. Husband away, living in a place like 4 hours away from the only tiny bit of family I have in the UK anyway. And yet I still got the shingle scars on my back, as I always say, like my stripes of like, don't do it this way. It doesn't work. When I try to carry everything myself and do it in my own power and my own ability and my own control. And I am a control freak and I am a perfectionist, recovering perfectionist and a recovering control freak. And it's really been the last couple of years where I have learned to, and I'm still learning to do it, but like genuinely detach, surrender. And the third baby was a total surprise. If you want a lesson in detachment and surrender, have a surprise third baby when you think you are so done with children, and have it whilst you're posted overseas. Like that whole lesson, I genuinely think she was she 1,000% is my gift from God, but she's my biggest lesson from God in line. Like, you have no control over your life. Like, you can think you do, and yeah, you can make decisions, and like, by all means, I'll let you have the rope sometimes, but ultimately you are in control and I've got this. So like, just trust the process. And so for me, when I step into my business in the morning, when I get on a coaching call with a client, when I come on a podcast like this, it is like kind of take the reins. Like I heard one of my clients say, what does she say when she gets a bit overwhelmed? Oh, Jesus, take the wheel. Which I absolutely love. Like, I'm out. This is too much for me. Like, you're in control. And so for me, if I call it God, call it my intuition, call it a compass, that is genuinely everything for me in my business and my life, because it means that it's not all on me. And that is so much more freeing and so much more enjoyable. And I think it almost ensures like a affirmation I give to my clients a lot, or kind of not affirmation, more of like a guidance, is let joy be your compass in your business. Otherwise, you get so caught up in the I shoulds, and I could be there, and that expert tells me to be on Pinterest, but that person says I should be on LinkedIn, but she says I need a Facebook group, but then we get all the marketing for the Stu McLaren memberships and the B schools and whatever else is happening, and it gets really, really overwhelming. And so, but if you have this drive inside of you of let joy be my compass, suddenly you build a business you actually genuinely love, rather than like what everyone else tells you to build. So yeah, very long answer to your question. Genuinely, all my success is down to me, not down to me, that sounds terrible, down to me surrendering and kind of, saying kind of God, you're in control, and I'm here to kind of, be your hands, be your voice, and serve the people I'm to serve.
Yeah. And it makes total sense to me, no matter what your belief system is or what you call it, that idea that it's counterintuitive for a lot of us. And I think once we become mothers and we step into this role of having a bigger mental load and feeling like we have to control more things. And in some ways we do, right? As mothers, like we are in control of more things. We do have to manage more things. And in some ways the business was our first baby, right? It's like the first foray into parenting or mothering in a way. And then you add human babies into the mix. And at some point you've got to go, okay, I have to trust that they're going to be okay. Just like we do with our human babies, where it's like, I can only do so much for them. I can only protect them to an extent. I can only nurture and feed them to an extent. And then life is nature, and chaos, and the universe is going to have its way. Right. And so
Absolutely.
I think that is a big lesson for a lot of us in business and work in general. Is it's counterintuitive to think that letting go or loosening that grip of control will create more abundance or make it easier. But truly, when you do that, and you can trust that letting go a little bit and going, I've had this nudge for 2 years. I'm going to jump in and do this coaching thing. I think it's what I'm meant to do. And finally trusting it, like that's when the abundance rushes in. That's when the ease comes back in. And that imposter syndrome we felt, or the hesitation or the mom guilt or whatever it is that has come up, is like, oh, okay, this is the reassurance I needed, that the nudge was real and that I can do this, and God or universe has my back in pursuing all of it. I love that. And I think that's super relatable. And I love the quote too about joy being the compass, because another thing that I hear so much from entrepreneurial mothers, whatever journey, like whatever stage of the journey you're on, whether you've just become a mother or you're, years in with multiple children, joy starts to be one of these things where you're like, well, what is joy for me anymore? Like I might have known what joy was for me pre-motherhood because I could control myself all the time. And now joy feels fleeting, or joy feels like joy is, of course, found in my children, but I'm so tired, or I'm so stressed, or I'm the breadwinner and I don't have time for joy. I have to work, So I love that reminder, that check-in of like, what is your definition of joy? And are you letting it guide you in your decision-making? Because it is so easy to get caught up in the decision-making that's scarcity-based or external validation-based or guilt or shame-based, not joy-based. And I really don't think a lot of our culture in the US or the UK is set up to reward joy. It's really set up to reward work and shame, right? Like, like
absolutely.
Avoiding shame versus pursuing joy. And what if we all really focus on just pursuing joy instead of avoiding shame? Like how different would the world be? Right? So I want to talk a little bit more about building a product-based company, because a lot of entrepreneurs that I talk with and that are in my orbit are service-based, entrepreneurs, whether it's coaching companies or online education, digital products, those kind of things. And I've built some product-based businesses too. So I understand the difference, but I'm so curious in the iteration phase. And you said, you had an idea and you worked with a supplier, you told them what you needed. They took the chance on you. And then it was just like this explosion in the market of success and notoriety and awards and stuff like that. In building a product-based business where it's less like personal brand, it's not necessarily you built the social media, and I want to talk about that, but the product has to speak for you in a way, right? How did you think about quality and like serving the customer? And what I'm trying to get at is, I think a lot of us, when we think about being entrepreneurs, we put so much pressure on ourselves. Like, I'm the brand, it's me, I'm the face, I'm the CEO, I'm the founder. Like, it's really, I have to show up so strongly in the brand. With a lot of product brands, the founder is maybe second tier, secondary importance to the product itself, the quality or the problem it solves. How did you, in building a product company, especially targeted at moms and babies, how did you navigate that? Like learning how you fit in, how you built the brand with your story and your face, but really put the product in the forefront in terms of the problem you were solving, and just how you thought about all of that.
I really wish I could reply with some hardcore business strategy insights here, but I winged it like I don't even know what. When I launched that business, my first was 5 months old. And so I was prime candidate as my ideal customer. She was teething. I was making teething jewelry. It was called Mama and Belle. She is Belle. She was the face of it. She was the brand. I went in talking to my people in a way that I needed to be spoken to at the time. Because obviously, I was living as my ideal customer. And I think for me at the time, and I'm really thinking back here, we're going back 10 years, which just frightens me because I feel like she was born yesterday. Yeah, there wasn't like hardcore brand positioning, placement, or anything like that. I remember thinking at the time that because I am living it, I've got the baby, she's teething, that I was going to be on the social media platforms. I was going to be doing lives. I was going to be showing my face plenty. We were literally on the packaging, Belle and I, and the swing tags and everything like that all over the website. So for me, it was never necessarily initially about kind of the brand, the product, and me behind it. That pivoted when I realized it was becoming something. When I'm like, wow, this is actually a thing that exists beyond me now. And so I remember it was shortly after my second was born, Delilah, and she kind of was over like the intense newborn breastfeeding all the time stage. And I'm like, okay, I think I can start like tiptoeing back into kind of growing the business again. And I went for a big rebrand, big new website, better product ranges and everything like that. I think that was probably the first time where I'm like, right, I need to create a brand that isn't like Suzy.com, that is thisproduct.com. And that's when we started attracting the big distributors and the international deals and the department store stockists and things like that. But I think still, even then, like people, as we always say, even in the coaching industry and service space, like people buy from people. And so I think you can try and build something that's kind of separate to you. But if it starts becoming faceless and impersonal, like you lose people. So I've signed a flurry recently of product-based businesses as my clients, and they all gone for the very much like, the brand is like apart from me over there, like arm's length, and they literally are hiding behind their brand. And so I've gotten all of them to like, I want to see you, and I'm getting all messages saying like, sales have gone up 29%. And I teach this a lot in my coaching programs. I think a lot of product-based businesses can take a few pages at the book of the service-based and vice versa in just showing how to get your character and get your personality and get your heart across, even though you are selling a product that isn't your services, it isn't your mind, isn't your expertise. So yeah, I hope that answers your question in a very roundabout way.
No, that's perfect. And that's my experience with it. And my hunch too is, you know, especially now, maybe 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it was less personal, right? Like if it was a baby product and it was the only one on the market, it's like, that's the one I needed. Now we're so much further into social media, so much further into like what I would call influencer culture, where we have this, whether it's subconscious or even conscious at this point, desire to see a relatable person using the product, right? And it's such a powerful vehicle to influence us if we see someone we relate to buying the thing. Like that's why Amazon influencers are such a big deal now. I'm like, oh, I need a new vacuum. She's using that vacuum. She made a pretty reel about it, and here's her Amazon link, and I can get it today. Like, I mean, the dopamine loop of that is so tight. Like,
oh gosh.
So for sure, I think when we think of the psychology of it, it makes a lot of sense to go, hey, even in a product-based business that's a baby product, it's not Suzy's product, it makes sense to have a separate brand and kind of pull it away from you. But you are the reason. You're still ultimately the face and the experience and the mom who said, I had a fussy baby who was teething, and I read that this stuff can help, and then I couldn't find a good quality piece anywhere in the UK. So I created it. Like that tried and true storyline of like, I had the problem, I solved it. Like I am my own best customer. I found a way to solve it. Now I want to show you. And I think, you know, that will always be something that we pay attention to as entrepreneurs and mothers is we want to be in the village, like this proverbial village. We want to know that if my neighbor bought it and it worked for her, I'll buy it because it'll probably work for me, because if we're neighbors, we likely have similar lives and similar values and all of those things. And in the absence of the real village, we live, you know, the social media village is where we go to find that kind of stuff. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm always curious about those kind of stories, because I like to hear when the product-based person realized or like kind of woke up to the fact of where they factor into the balance of the product, especially in these kind of origin stories where you really started it because you had a need for it and it was a related product to your life. Like we're not talking about now how e-com can be where you've got like bros selling stuff from drop shipping from China that they never touch and it's sold through a TikTok ad. Like that's a whole different world. But in these kind of like curated lifestyle products, story is so important, and sharing the real the mother behind the idea is so critical. So now with Mothers of Enterprise, talk a little bit more about, you know, what you commonly see working with other mothers who are entrepreneurs, and in this world of the mother load, like the harmony that we're always trying to find between pursuing our ambition and like going after the goal and fulfilling our dreams and wanting to be really devoted mothers and present and do things differently than our mothers did, perhaps, or whatever. How does that show up for you in your own life now, running your business, as well as what are some of the common ways you see it show up in the women you work with where they're navigating that balance? I use the word balance. Actually, don't use that word. They're navigating the harmony of that. Because it's not really about balance, right? It's about understanding that there will always be ebbs and flows between all of that stuff. And if you're in a busy season for the business, it may be that you need a lighter season at home and more help there, and vice versa. So how is that showing up in your life now that you're really focused on Mothers of Enterprise and then working with so many mothers to build businesses? What are some of the common objections or themes around this kind of stuff that you see come up?
Well, firstly, I love that you don't like the word balance. I've literally have a social media post that probably goes out every 3 or 4 months in my repurposing cycle, which is talking about this. I think it's such a myth, this work-life balance thing. I remember reading the book, The One Thing, when I was pregnant with Belle. So we are talking 10 years ago, when they're saying nothing amazing happens in the middle. When you're balancing things, nothing epic happens. If you think of athletes or your Fortune 500 CEOs, amazing things happened when they went all in. And so we need to allow for that. That's kind of give and take in business. And if I'm in a launch, then you bet I'll ask nanny to do some extra hours for me to look after the kids or get the husband home from work early so I can be in the business more. And for us, summer holidays are coming up. My kids are finishing school in 3 weeks. I literally stop work completely. And we're moving house again. So that's another thing. But I will not be on my laptop. I will not be doing any coaching calls, and I'll be all in with my kids because that's kind of a very intentional thing for me. Same thing for Christmas. I stop work, so I want to be with my kids. So just had to completely confirm that is genuinely what I think one of the big pitfalls that mums go through is how do I balance it all? You don't blooming balance it all. You just carefully organize which is going to get the most of you and get support and help around the rest of it. So I will be the first person to say that I've gotten this very wrong in the past. I am one of those people who had this belief, this kind of running narrative that success equals hard work. And that if I'm going to be successful, then I better be willing to work my ass off. / if I want to be successful, the only way I'm going to get there is by working my ass off. And so I really, for a very long time, and I'm going to say probably the first kind of decade of my entrepreneurship, hustled like there was no tomorrow. I would be that person up until 3 a.m. at the morning, knowing I'm going to have a kid waking me up at 5 a.m. because that's just what you do. You push yourself. And remember watching a Will Smith, completely the wrong person, Will Smith, inspirational YouTube talk. And he was saying no one will ever outwork me and I'll be the first one in and the last one out. I'm yeah, that's me. I remember feeling so stirred up by it. Now I listen to it and I'm hell no, get thee behind me. Will I ever be like that again? And so it took a lot of work and therapy and coaching for me to change that narrative and be actually, I am successful and I achieve success because I decide I'm going to achieve success. And I get to decide what that looks like for me. And I get to decide the terms in which that success is built. And so I got really, really intentional with this business going, I only work 3.5 days a week. The last week of every month I take off and I can do what the heck I want with it. If I want to work, cool. If I don't want to work, cool too. I don't work August. I don't work most of December. I don't work any of the school holidays. I finish work at 2:30 every day to pick up my kids. I do not work in the evenings. And so I made these kind of laws around in which my business had to exist in. And so when opportunities came in or big ideas, which I like to churn out by the hour most days, come in, I can kind of measure them against those laws. Does it fit into this? Yes or no? And suddenly you've got a very clear decision maker in your business. And when you combine that with let joy be my compass, suddenly you're building a business which feels like a spa day at Disneyland with champagne on tap. It just feels amazing all the time because you're wow, I'm getting to be who I actually want to be in life. And again, even with that intentionality, I still get it wrong sometimes. And I'll still be okay, well, Gabriella, the youngest, is watching TV and the other two are playing outside. I'll just quickly open the laptop and quickly reply to a few clients. And then obviously it's a vortex and it sucks you in. And then you find yourself snapping at your kids going, oh, mommy just has to reply to this. Just be quiet for a second. And you're what the hell am I doing? It's 5 p.m. on a Thursday. Why am no, this is my time with them. And so for me, again, I have to bring that really strong intentionality into my work, into my mothering, because for me, nothing is more important than my role as a mother, a wife, and a homemaker. my business comes at the bottom of all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that I have built a business which is so successful and does all the things it's meant to do and earns great income, but allows me to bake sourdough on weekends with my girls and cook from scratch and take them out and pick them from school and be at home with them on the couch when they're not well and that type of thing. So it really, really is about allowing yourself to believe that you actually get to create the success that you want in the way you want to create it. And so the whole term, like creating success in your own terms, gets thrown around a lot. And I don't think people actually know what it means. Like you genuinely actually get to design your success. You are in business. You haven't got a job. Jobs are when things getting forced onto you. And so many of my clients, especially when I start working with women, I kind of say to them, like, you've built yourself into your own worst boss. Like,
Yes.
in fact, it's the worst kind of boss because you can't call in sick tomorrow and you can't say like, I don't want to do that or anything like that. And she doesn't even reward you. She doesn't give you pay increases. She doesn't give you days off. Like, what are you doing? And you're like, oh, hang on a second. My husband does it to me. He's like, oh, who's your boss? And I'm like, oh no, I have to go and finish this. And he's like, who's your boss? I'm like, don't do that. It's mildly triggering, but I see you and you're right. And okay, I haven't got a boss and I'm putting the pressure on myself and I can bring that intentionality back and be like, okay, hang on, remember what my business laws are. Mother, wife, homemaker.
It's funny because I have the same values of like my priorities. When my life fell apart in 2020, I had this like awakening to, I had to flip my priorities because it had always been like business first, like survival mode, and then taking care of all the kids' needs. And then like sometimes dealing with my partner and then myself last. And I had to flip it through the work I did in 2020 and 2021 to rebuild my life to go, I've got to put myself first. Like I've got to stick to my boundaries, my laws, like you're talking about, to what's my joy and how am I discerning the right decisions for myself? Because if I'm good, everything else below is good. And then it's my partner because he's the other half of my operating system, right? And if he and I are not good, the dissonance there will create problems and everything else. And then the kids, because obviously my kids are more important than my business. But that was big work for me to go, I can turn the computer off at 5 p.m. and put the business aside and have those strong boundaries and focus on my kids or cancel a whole day of meetings or podcasts because a kid is sick or something like that. And trust that the business will be okay. And by putting the business last, it actually, I mean, it was rocky at first because like you're talking about, you have to relearn all those behaviors and all that messaging in our minds where we're so conditioned that the only way we're going to be successful is we work ourselves to death. But in turning that priority order to go self, relationship, kids, and then business, that's been the most liberating and freeing thing and allowed me to stay in like really true resonance with my business where I can feel really quickly when something is not a good fit for me or it's about to go out of the boundaries you're talking about, because I'm like, I can feel that this is going to compromise my prioritization or my boundaries around this. And I think that's really common. And I wonder like what your thoughts are on where that comes from. I obviously have a lot of opinions on it, but that messaging seems so pervasive, especially in mothers. Like it's pervasive in women, millennial women. I think it comes from a lot of the culture we were raised in, the millennial generation around like, you can do anything. And we heard that as like, you should do everything. Like, oh, you can do anything. You should be doing it all, obviously. Like, why would you leave any opportunity on the table? At least like, that's how I internalized it. But then as a mother in business, there's this like new level I got to of feeling exactly what you described, where it was like, success is hard work. Like I have to be up till 2 a.m. finishing this thing, even though I know the kids are going to be up at 5 because there's some pride or like some sick thing I'm trying to prove to, I guess, myself that I can do all of these things. When the question your husband asked is so correct. It's like, who's your boss? Like if I had a boss forcing me to do that, I would be done with that job before the end of the day. Right. And yet myself, when it's myself doing that or allowing that type of bad behavior without a boundary or any kind of like self check-in to go, hey, this is not the energy we want to be in, Linz. I have such a tendency to prescribe to that same belief system and then fall back into those patterns. So where do you think that comes from? Like, where do you see it come from in the people you work with, and how do you coach people out of it?
I think it's like the Pinterest generation.
Yeah.
And the social media generation. Like we're the ones who kind of, well, our generation freaking invented it all, thanks. And it's great. And I love it all. But like we came into our adulthood and our motherhood with that stuff just everywhere. And suddenly we had all these models of motherhood and kids' birthday parties and our bodies and our beauty and our hair and our clothes and our houses and like every other thing on the list. And because I think we were raised with the generation of kind of like, you can be anything you want to be now. But what I feel like was missing in that sentence, and I talk about this a lot, and I'm always aware that one day I'm going to get like someone in like the strong feminist movement coming in and telling me I'm putting things back slightly. What we weren't told is, yes, you can be everything, but if you want to be a mother, keep that in mind. That's it. Just be like, if you want to be a present stay-at-home mom, or if you just want to be like available for your kids, like just keep that in mind when like picking out what you want to be in life. Because sure, you can have the high-flying career and you can go and be the C-level exec somewhere, but like you're not going to see your kids that much. And like, are you okay with that? So like my beautiful dear husband, who isn't a millennial, he likes to remind me he's born in the 70s. He kind of had this insight from a young age going, he wanted to go into the medical industry of some kind. And when he was weighing up all the different professions he could go into, he asked himself the question of like, which one will allow me to be a great dad and a great husband?
Wow.
And so like he was going to go down the doctor route. He's like, actually, no, that's not going to let me be at home with my kids. Like that might be shifts and things like that. And I don't want that. And so he chose a completely different kind of medical career path, one that really catered for him to be a present dad. And I'm like, dude, like who has that kind of foresight at 18 years old when you're a guy? Like back in South Africa, back in the 90s, like I'm so grateful he had that foresight, but like I didn't. And that's the things for me, my clients, like I've got clients who've got PhDs and multiple MBAs and worked their way up to multiple six-figure, even seven-figure corporate careers, had children, and suddenly everything reshuffles in their life and all their ambition changes. And they're like, oh shit, I've built a life and a career which doesn't actually serve the number one thing I want to be serving right now, which is my children. And so suddenly we got to reconfigure all of this, like you can be it all, do it all notion with like, but actually I just want to be a mom. I just want to be present for my kids. I want to watch them grow up. I want to raise them. I want to be on hand. I want to be there for the sleepless nights and for the sick days and whatever else happens in the joys of kids growing up. And so I think when you combine that realization or that kind of like having to juggle that duality of like be it all, have it all, but then also wanting to be like the mum that's present for your kids. And then you throw Pinterest into it and Pinterest birthday parties and everything else. Like it gets so heavy. And like my lovely coach interviewed me on her podcast last year. And like I was the mum who would start planning the kids' birthday parties out like 4 months in advance. We get the theme going, a Pinterest board will get set up. I'll have them next to me going like, right, you choose your cake. And heaven forbid I outsourced any of it. Like I had to be the one making it and cooking it and baking it and gluing it and designing it because again, same as you, I don't even know why. I don't even know why it had to be me. It was like some like weird, as Brene Brown says it, the burnout badge of honor.
Yeah.
Like the more tired I am and the more I can show I've overworked myself and the more I can show like how I've like taken my fingers down to the bone with my hard work, like the better I am. The better mum I am, the better human I am, like absolute BS. And so my big like epiphany realization was like, that isn't success. That is not being a successful human, a successful wife, a successful mum, a successful business owner. And then I remember I hired a beautiful coach who I'm still with today a couple of years ago. And she was like, why would you even want to create success in those terms? And I was like, I don't even know. And that's was when my therapy as well started, was like, hang on, let's rewrite those terms for myself. Let's rewire the beliefs that actually I get to have all the success, all the income I've ever wanted, but make it fit into my terms and literally design how I experience that success. And that's been everything for me. And that's a massive bulk of the work I do with my clients, of just making them realize that there isn't this cookie cutter mold for what they have to fit into to be successful. They literally get to do whatever they want. Like man and women, I'm sure you've seen this a lot, of like, oh, I think I need a membership, and I need a course, and I need to do coaching, and I need a mastermind, and I'm like, and I need a retreat. And I'm like, woman, like you just exhausted me with your list. Like you've only got 10 hours a week to work. Like, no. Which one like makes you the most happy, most excited? Well, retreats do. Okay, cool. That's all we're going to do. And we're going to get that working really well for you. And we're going to get you to 6 figures or whatever their income goal is for that. And then we'll like layer and stack in as you go and as time allows and as kids allow and everything like that. So The biggest shift just needs to be women realizing they do get to have it all. I genuinely believe I have it all. I have got a beautiful, healthy marriage. I've got 3 magnificent little girls. I've got a thriving business and a great team. I feel looked after. I have my hour and a half to myself every morning where I walk the dog and I exercise and have a really slow shower, and I have my devotional time and my journal time, and I start work at like 10:30, 11, feeling so filled up and so good about myself. I'm like, wow, like, yeah, I'm living in a military house. Not my choice, but it's the season of life I'm in. I'm going to rock these magnolia walls as long as I have to. But like, I genuinely feel like I have it all because I realized I can't do it all. And that was my epiphany, going, actually, you know what? I don't even want to do it all. I don't want the burnout badge of honor. I want people to celebrate me, which kind of leads back to what we were talking about earlier. I want people to celebrate me for how rested I am, and for how much free time I have, and for how easy I have my life. Like, that's what I want to be known and celebrated for. And that was a lot of mental rework for me, because my whole belief system was like, the harder I work, like the burnt out martyr of motherhood.
Yeah. It's such a common archetype.
Yeah, we carry that around so often. Like, motherhood is this like all surrendering, all sacrificing, like I exist for everyone else martyr. And I'm like, no, BS to it all. And I think having 3 little girls, I was like, no, I need to model to them what it means to be a successful woman on all fronts, on every front of my life. And so that responsibility kind of felt very heavy to me in a good, healthy, motivational way to sort my shit out. And to start kind of modeling what it means to be successful and happy and healthy on all fronts.
Yeah. It's such a common archetype that you see is like that burnout model. And then we have the glorification of it, or like the excusing of it with like mommy wine culture and all these other things where it's like, hey, instead of addressing how wrong it is that you are like incredibly burned out and somewhat resentful of your life, like, here's some wine. Just drink some glasses of wine at night and like giggle about it. It'll be fine.
Everything.
And instead of really helping people come to the realization like that you're describing, which I've come to too, which is like, in order to have the thing, so this is the mindfuck of all of it in my mind, is like, I think a lot of us believe that like success equals hard work. The ultimate payout of that is ease. Like, we're like, oh, someday if I work hard enough, I'm going to be successful enough that someday it'll be easy. When the cosmic joke of all of it is like, or it could just be easy today if you stopped working so hard, and I think that that's what's so triggering to a lot of people is, and they're like, well, there's no way it would be that easy, and you get kind of the barbing fight back on, it can't be that easy. I have to work hard. I can't just not sell 7 things. I can't just sell retreats, Susie. I have to have a whole ascension model, because that's the only way when I do the math that I'll ever get to the dollar amount you want. And you're like, well, why do you want that dollar amount? Well, because that's the dollar amount that's going to buy me ease. And it's like, is it like, or you cut your dollar amount by 5 and you make 200,000 instead of $1 million, but your expenses drop because you don't need a team of 6 people and you don't need full-time childcare. And voila, you've got a nice little income on 10 hours a week of work to fill your 6 retreats a year. And you get to spend time with your kids, which is actually what you say you want, And I think a lot of women, in my experience, it's exactly that cycle of like, they think the burnout hard work success model is what's going to lead to ease and freedom. And they go through that for years and years and years, and they continue to go through the cycle of like, why isn't it easy yet? Where's the ease? Like resentment builds, trouble happens in the relationship, burnout happens in the business, when what they could be doing based on what we're saying is like, or you could really get into alignment with what you really want, what's really lighting you up, and just be like excellent at that. And the rest of your life will fall into place from there. And I'm sure like a listener is like, yeah, sounds great, guys, and
easy for you to say.
Yeah. I mean, I think you and I were both there at some point in our lives too, where it's like, yeah, I went through years of feeling like I had to be in that cycle, and I kept asking myself, like, when is it going to fucking get easy? Like, why do I have to work so hard? But I'm in the similar place where you are now, where it's like, I've given up on all the things that I thought I had to do because that's what I thought I had to do. And now I'm only doing the things I want to do and finding ways for that to be enough. And for me to be trusting and open to the universe or God or whatever, that the money I need is going to come in as long as I stay in alignment with those things that I really want to be doing. So yeah, I think that's incredible insight. And I love the Pinterest generation. I'm going to think about that, because it is it's also that kind of impossible modeling that I think we've had in our generation around, you know, expectation versus reality. And a lot of what we see is expectation in a nice, pretty picture. And we're not seeing a lot of people's reality. And so we just assume that there's a million other mothers out there who are throwing perfect birthday parties and keep a perfectly white house and a perfect Instagram aesthetic all the time. And I'm like, where's all the loud plastic toys? Like, where's all the crumbs on the floor? Where's all the like dog hair? You know, I've got 2 dogs laying here right now. And that's the stuff that I think, at least for me, I like to speak so honestly about, because I'm like, yeah, like I make good money. We live in a nice house. It's not the nicest. It's not the biggest, like whatever. I have dogs. There's dog hair around. Like you and I are wearing, we were just joking about like, we're wearing our t-shirts. Like we're not, you know, like there isn't this Pinterest aesthetic that we have to prescribe to be successful. And that's another unlearning of, there's external pressure that's easy to respond to because it's more prolific than the messaging from inside. But if you go inward and you really learn what's the most important to you, all of a sudden those aesthetics and the way things look or having all of those milestones kind of like, it loses its importance.
Yeah, absolutely. I think also when your self-worth comes back to like your roles and who you are as an individual, as a created human being, and not at the end of 6 figures or 7 figures or 8 figures or that speaking gig or whatever the thing is, like it loses its attraction a little bit. Like I was a person who was like, I'm going to be a millionaire tomorrow, and like watch me make it happen and watch me buy the fancy cars and watch me, like I had this big thing about upgrading my engagement ring for years. I mean, I got married when I was 21, so we didn't have much money. I mean, it's still a beautiful ring, but I'm like, I'm successful now. It needs to be 2 carats. And I put all this pressure on myself and my poor dear man. Man, that dude, man, he needs a medal for putting up with me for the last 15 odd years. But like I had all this pressure, like I need to be successful and I need to look this way and my children have to look this way and my kids' birthday parties have to look this way and my car, my house and all the things. And I remember kind of getting to the point where like the business was doing like really healthy 5-figure months and I felt so suffocated by it. I'm like, but it's not enough for me to live this big life that I need to live to prove to everyone I've got my shit together and I'm successful and whatever. And when I let go of all of that and I'm like, you know what, my priorities, like I said, are my home, my life, my family. That stuff's faded away to the point I'm like, I want a homestead. I want some goats. I want some chickens. Like I want to live this really cool, slow life where I spend Saturdays, like say, making sourdough bread with my girls and baking from scratch and cooking from scratch and like farming and gardening and so chilled out and relaxed because I'm not hustling anymore. And like, I don't care what my car is. I genuinely don't. As long as it's good and it's safe and it fits all of us in and the dog, I really don't care what it is. And that is so freeing and it's so liberating and it makes life feel like genuinely like pinch me, is this real type life versus like I'm not enough, I'm never going to be enough, why is everyone else better than me? Like my kid's last birthday party was a store bought, wasn't even like a baker bought, it was going into the grocery store, bought cake at a park with friends. And you know what, I was present, I was with her, I actually was in her party with her rather than running around stressing out because this is melting and that needs to come out now and kids are messing up my house. And I was like, man, I've hacked it. The less you do, the more successful you are and the more you enjoy life. And it like took me 35 years to get there, but I'm so grateful I did. And I hope and pray that ladies listening can take that away and be like, you know what, full permission that you get to design your life, you get to design your business, and that it gets to be enough and it actually gets to be the very catalyst that creates your success.
Well, I just got goosebumps. So maybe we'll wrap it up there because I think that's all the perfect place to land is exactly that message. And you said it so clearly of like the less you do, the more free you are. And like, isn't the ultimate goal for all of us to be free, to choose how we spend our time, to choose how we feel in any moment. And the more tethered we are to external measure or the more tethered we are to performance, the less free we are. And so I think if you take away anything from this conversation, it's that idea. And it's not that we're saying go throw away, you know, the things you've worked so hard to build, but it is this question of where in your life are you in that hustle culture? Where are you in the burnout martyr archetype? And how can you start to unwind that pattern in your life? And
absolutely,
you know, there's plenty of people like us out there that can support you in those conversations and in that exploration in your life and in your business. So before we wrap up, can you share where to find you online? And we'll make sure that it makes it into the show notes too.
Sure. So it's literally everywhere is Mothers of Enterprise.
Awesome.
Or social medias or websites. That's where you find me.
Easy peasy. All right. Well, this was amazing. Thank you so much. I have so many more questions, but we'll just have to do a second episode sometime. But again, thank you for your candor and for being on the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And thank you all for listening. And I will see you on a future episode.